All right, today we're going to be discussing this book that we just randomly picked off of the bookshelves at a bookstore. It is called The Declaration of Rights. We are the Book Twins. I'm Kimberly.
I'm Carly.
Welcome. All right, so this is fun. This is a pick that was random, like we said before, and also I personally have never read anything like it before, so it's going to be fun to discuss. You, Carly?
Yeah, it was. We just picked it off the shelf, and it's like Kimberly said. It's called A Declaration of the Rights of Magicians, and one of those that looked interesting. So we're like, we'll see what we think.
Exactly.
So, this is what we think.
Exactly. All right, so let's go first. Prose. What do you think, Carly?
Prose was unique. Like Kimberly said, I've never read a book quite like this. So it's a kind of a rewrite of our own history, of European history, adding magic. So it's like what would have happened during, it was what, the 18th century?
Yes.
Late 18th century, if magic existed and there was magicians were pretty common throughout Europe.
Yes, and it starts off after the Revolutionary War with America, so right after that, and then you have these young politicians who are very wide-eyed and very passionate about what they believe politically, and their goal initially at the very beginning is to get rid of the slave trade, which is very noble and very ambitious because everybody looks down upon them, everybody laughs at them, everybody mocks them, but they have the gumption needed to go for what they believe.
So to preference this, so it takes place in 3 different locations.
Yes.
So you have, it takes place in England, where you have William Pitt and William Wilberforce, so the 2 main people you follow in England. And then you have France, where it's Robespierre and Camille, who you follow in France.
Yes.
And then it takes place in a French colony,
Saint-Domingue.
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 I think Saint-Domingue is where they follow in a French colony. So those are the 3 locations. And there you follow Fina. Well, she starts in Jamaica and then she ends up in Saint-Domingue.
Exactly.
And so you follow Fina and what was his name?
Toussaint.
Toussaint.
Right? And Fina is a ex-slave and Toussaint is a military officer.
Yes.
Essentially. And this book is divided up into these 3 locations, and the chapters, which I found a little disconcerting at first, were divided up by year and place, which for me was like a step back. Okay, we are jumping around, but you do see how the time is progressing very solidly because it's telling you what month and what year and what place you're at, but also it seemed a little detached from the characters itself. And I was actually confused at first of the progression of the chapters and the progression of the book. As it gets on, I was able to get accustomed to how the author decided she was going to divvy out the chapters and the sectioning of the book, but I did find it a little bit different at first.
Yeah. So this book is very event-driven. It's the characters...
Yes.
They never leave their countries. For the most part, they're where they are. So with those 3 locations, those characters, they stay there. And they never really interact at all, which was a little kind of weird, actually, because you have these characters who are spread in these locations, and they don't, they don't even communicate with each other. It's just...
Right, and there's very little action. It is mostly politics, and mostly dialogue or discussing. And when a big event happen, it is usually, okay, this happened. Let's discuss politically what's going on.
And, the consequences and what's going on, And so it makes it a little hard to, really get into it a little bit because it is so politically driven and so kind of removed from characters that you're mostly watching the events unfolding and how certain events affect other events and, these, broad strokes throughout Europe more than, what's going on in characters' lives.
And it felt, because it was mostly politics, it did feel very dry. And at times, you can't get really attached to the characters. But one thing that was really cool is because you're following 3 different sets of people in 3 different locations, you're able to see history even though it's a rewritten history, from 3 different angles, right? And so it's not like taking sides. It is just mostly like, okay, we want to be progressive here, and we want to change things in our environments and in our countries politically, and these people have taken different approaches, and it is interesting to see the decisions that they made had severe consequences, and they suffered because of those choices that they made, thus leading to the consequences.
And it goes really into like the morality almost of the choices that they're making. So you have in France, you have Robespierre, and he's the leader of the French Revolution, and this is like during the Reign of Terror. So you have, they're killing all of the nobility, and they're killing their king, and there's the guillotine, and there's a lot of death that goes on in the Reign of Terror, and so they kept that, like, that was very much part of what was going on in that point.
Right, and then you have the people that were following, Robespierre and Camille, they're the string pullers, right? They're the ones making all the decisions, and everything is happening based off of what they say, and lots of bad things are happening as it's called the Reign of Terror, and Britain is afraid because they're like, look what's going on in France. Should we do something? Should we not do something? It's their country, it's their revolution, but yet it could be affecting us. And so you see all these people who have lots of power and control, and seeing what goes on in their lives, both at home and their families and their morals. And it's very interesting to see how they are making the decisions.
Yeah.
And it is fiction because there's a lot of magic involved. And so lots of the choices are
based around those magic and what's legal with magic and what's not.
Yes, and so it kind of like puts a different, oh my goodness, didn't think about that, how magic can play a role as a tool in these political wars and these political maneuverings amongst these countries.
Yeah. I mean, it was really interesting because I feel like it would have been like accurate if magicians and magic were real. This is how it would have played out in Europe at the time, because so instead of like the Catholic Church, which was a big influence in Europe, it was the Knights Templar,
right.
and it was all because of magic, because they're afraid of magic, and so they had created laws that banned like the common people from using magic, and so it was illegal, and so you have a lot of that's what's driving things is them trying to make magic for the common people legal.
Right, and then versely as well, some things that are also banned by the Knights Templar is the dark arts, essentially. Is that what it's called in the book?
Blood magic, I think.
Blood magic or the dark arts. Yeah. And they're like, well, the Knights Templar, they banned common magic, but they also banned the dark arts. So I guess, where do we draw the line, right? If we get rid of them and we get rid of all their rules, can we then use both sets? And the different countries had essentially different takes on what they decided to do, and
the consequences of that.
Outcomes of each country was different. And that's one thing that I was talking to Carly early as we started beginning this book. I'm like, if there's really people with magic, I can't foresee that these countries wouldn't take advantage of these people with magic and essentially use them as weapons or tools, right? You have these very extremely powerful magics and beings in these books. Governments need weapons, at least in protection of their own countries. And I was like, they better address that, Carly, because if not, it doesn't seem real. And they did. And I really appreciate that. And it actually became a core part of how that book actually wrapped up at the end.
A major thing that they needed.
Yes.
So there is going to be another one. I don't know if it's going to be a trilogy or just a duology. So there is going to be another one that I think comes out this year.
Okay, good.
So we'll probably read that one too.
Yes, to see how it wraps up. I think that this book is it's not for everyone. If you are very into the political sides and the maneuverings of, countries and how countries interact with one another and history, it would be a fun read. But if you are more like, you love characters, you love character developments, you want to get attached to the characters, you want to fall in love or hate them, you want some romance, then this is not the book for you, because there was very little human relationships. There was very little human development or character development. There was but
no romance in the book.
Zero romance. Yeah. It was mostly just these political maneuverings with laws and politics.
Yeah.
So
pretty much. But
but if you need something like that to cleanse your palate, or like, hey, you want to try something different, if you're a history buff, hey, this would be a great one, because it's like history and fantasy combined and mixed together. So that's fun.
It was an interesting read. So
very interesting.
It was. I think it was worth it.
Right.
It's a relatively thick book, like you can see.
There's over 500 pages.
Yeah, and it's very much an adult novel, so it's not like it's not a YA novel. It's very much adult. But it was fascinating. I find I really like reading like historical fiction books, so this was right up my alley.
Yeah.
So
it was fun how they decided how the author she decided to incorporate and fantasize the Reign of Terror. I really appreciated that. That was a fun rendition of this.
Of that time
retelling
period.
For sure.
Yeah. All right. So what would you rate it?
So I would probably say like a C-. Like it. I don't know if I would. I'd be hard pressed to read the second one. It was a little too dry for me.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah.
I mean, I would definitely put it somewhere in the C range just because it was a little harder to get into and it was a little drier, which makes it not for everyone.
But what about for you personally, Carly?
But for me personally, I'd probably put it in the higher range of a C.
Okay.
Upper 70s.
All right.
I did enjoy it. It's probably not a book I'll read multiple times, though.
Right.
So there's that to it. But yeah, so if you have read this book, tell us what you think.
Yeah, and you have different insight. I mean, we're obviously from America, and so everything that I know about the Reign of Terror and that time period definitely is from Americans' perspective, because that's what we're taught and then read books and stuff. So if y'all have other insights or perspectives, we would love to hear about them. So let us know.
That's what you think.
Bye.